Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Justin Gold. I'm one of the student organizers of the conference. It's my pleasure to introduce Seth Partnow, the Director of Basketball Research for the Milwaukee Bucks. He's going to be giving a competitive advantage talk on the truth and myths of the three-point revolution in basketball. So let's give him a round of applause and bring him up here.
Thanks. Thanks for coming. Am I on? Good. Okay. As Justin said, my name is Seth Partnow. I'm the Director of Basketball Research for the Milwaukee Bucks, along with my partner, Mike Clutterbuck, our Director of Analytics. We are in charge of providing statistical support for the whole range of basketball operations for the Bucks. Before that, I was the editor and a writer at nyloncalculus.com. And since my work for the Bucks is private and proprietary, it's a funny thing for a competitive advantage talk to not give away any competitive advantages. I'm going to be relying a lot on the work of myself and myself and many of the other writers from Nylon Calculus have done over the last couple of years. I'd read off their names, but I'd forget a couple. I just want to give a special thanks to Matt Deanna, who helped with some of the visualizations you'll see in the presentation that follows. As I said, I'm the, I guess the meta point of my talk is that the way we talk about our statistical insights is a vital thing towards them actually being adopted. All the statistics in the world don't matter if it's just numbers on a page. If people are familiar with the work of Kahneman and Tversky, I'm sure most people in this room are. One of their key insights that's been most interesting to me is that the human mind is really bad at processing and understanding statistical probabilistic information if it's not attached to a narrative, if you don't tell a story, if you don't have the mechanism for how a phenomena actually impacts what you're discussing. Now, in a sporting situation, that means that people who work in sports follow sports, whether it's someone who works in a front office, is a coach, follows a sport intently as a fan. They have very strong prior opinions about how something works. So it's not just enough to say, well, here's some stats that tell you you're wrong. Those stats have to be put into a story, into a context that in a way knocks out their previous understanding in a way that provides them to mentally understand, okay, I see what's happening now, I get it, I see what you're talking about. And so I think that's the kind of the meta point of my talk, is figuring out ways to frame our insights in a way that allows people, that almost gives people the permission to come up with, to accept these new narratives. So, as I said, people have these strong opinions. Many of them are very based in fact. People have been studying sports to some degree for as long as sports have existed. These narratives that people have constructed in their own mind often have a grain of truth. In many cases, they're completely true. Sometimes they're not, and some of those myths are some of the things I want to talk about in the context of the rise in the three-point revolution, the rise in the three-point attempt rate in basketball. So that's sort of the frame on which I'm hanging the rest of my talk. So the first myth I want to talk about is that, again, here's a quick graph of what's changed over the last couple of years. But the first thing I want to talk about is this constant thing. You hear it over and over again in kind of the basketball media, and that's saying the NBA has become a jump shooting league. First of all, people say jump shooting teams can't win the championship. 10 of the last 12 NBA finalists were top 10 in three-point rate over the season. Make of that what you will. My question or response to this statement that the NBA has become a jump shooting league is, when has it not been a jump shooting league? If you look, we have decent shot location data going back to late 90s. It gets reliable around 99, 2000. If you look at the proportion over time of shots that came from outside of 10 feet, reasonable definition of jump shot, it was in 99, 2000, 55% of shots were jump shots. Last year, 55% of shots were jump shots. Now, if 10 feet is too close, 15 feet, you can see the orange line, it's risen a little, kind of started at 42%, peaked at 48%, and is in around 46% now. The point is, NBA teams have always taken a lot of jump shots, and to understand why, to provide the counter narrative to it's become a jump shooting league is what's kind of the first adage of defensive basketball is protect the paint, right? So since basketball has been coached, teams have been taught to protect the paint. Everyone knows you don't need analytics, you don't need fancy statistical programs to say that layup or a dunk is more accurate than a long jump shot. So since the defense is trying to prevent those shots and there's a time constraint on when you can shoot, being the shot clock, obviously some shots are going to come from farther away. So this has always been the case. What we do see, again, with those more shots moving from 10 to 15 feet away to longer away, is that more longer jump shots have been taken. Now, even that's an exercise in framing. If I say teams are taking more long jump shots than ever before, that sounds like they're settling. That sounds almost negative or a capitulation. If I said that now teams that are shooting these jump shots have found more valuable ways to more valuable spots to shoot from because 3 is greater than 2, now it sounds like smart strategy and really taking advantage of the geometry of the court in a way that again is smart strategically rather than being a weakness. Another myth that I want to talk about briefly, again, this is something that's very commonly said during a game, is long shots lead to long rebounds and allow fast breaks. Again, with most of these myths, there's some truth to it. A long shot leads to a longer rebound if it misses because physics is a thing, and if you shoot from further away, the ball hits the rim and comes off harder. However, those long rebounds don't lead to more fast breaks, and I'll talk about why a little bit in a second. But if you look over time, over 15, 20 years of data, a shot from around the rim that gets rebounded is between 1.5 and 2 times more likely to lead to a fast break than an above the break 3. Corner threes, slightly more fast breakable, but still much less so than a missed shot in the paint. And again, it's not simply enough to say these facts. You have to talk about the reason why. And I think the reason why is that, first of all, again, we remember because of the way our minds work, that the times these long shots lead to long rebounds. We see a defender close out on a shooter, the guy misses, the defender sprints down the floor and gets a layup. That sticks in our mind. We say, oh, that happens all the time, when actually it happens much less. What I think is happening, and this is kind of the counter narrative that we use to knock out the bad idea before, is that a three-pointer is most often the result of good play. You've had good execution, good spacing. Part of good spacing means the floor is balanced. The floor being balanced when you shoot means that there's always someone back on defense. Especially on an above the break 3, the shooter is already halfway back. So that means it's easier for your defensive possession to start well if you've taken that shot. So again, you see there's the grain of truth in the long shots lead to long rebounds and fast break, but the coming up with the better idea of explaining why it's not completely true is important. Next one is, again, a similar complaint that we hear is that the mid-range game has been lost. This is going to become a theme, I think. It's superficially accurate. The blue line is the proportion of mid-range shots, which I'm defining here as shots from outside the paint but inside the three-point arc. The proportion of mid-range shots has plummeted over the years, while the orange line, the three-pointers, has risen steadily. That's unmistakably true. However, I don't think when people are talking about, the lost art of the mid-range, they're not talking about, and in my mind it's always Jerome Kersey when I say this, they're not talking about a power forward shooting a 17-foot baseline jump shot as the mid-range game. They're talking about players who kind of get into the top of the key, the elbow areas, operate, create their own shot, hit a pull-up, something like that. If we look at those shots, this is the proportion of made shots. The red line are assisted mid-range shots. The yellow line are unassisted mid-range shots. Those kind of self-created shots have held basically steady over the course of time. These, you might call them, like to call them star shots, because it's really your best players you want taking those shots. Those have actually, by some, and again, I'll display it graphically. This is a look at the density of how many shots in a given location are assisted. We see when it starts over, starting in the late 90s, all those shots on the baseline were assisted shots, catch and shoot shots. And as time has gone on, those catch and shoot shots from those low value areas have moved to under the rim and out to the corners, especially. But the truth of the matter is that these star players are still shooting star shots. Again, I'm talking about kind of the self-created, unassisted mid-range shots. If looking at players who are very high usage, defining them as 27% or higher, just sort of arbitrarily, their proportion of makes have increased from 7% to 11.5%. That's over 50% increase over the last 15 years in terms of the proportion of their made shots that are these long two-pointers kind of above the free throw line but below the arc. Relatedly, I think, recently we've seen and this is something that's gotten a lot of press recently since we're talking about three-pointers, unassisted above the break threes have in the last 4 years have gone up greatly amongst this group. Amongst other categories of players, unassisted threes, basically pull-up threes, have held more or less steady. But amongst this group of star players, as you can see by the numbers on the presentation, it's doubled and even tripled in the last 4 years. And that rise is driven primarily by a small number of players. If you're looking at assisted three rates, there were about 340 extra unassisted threes last year from what the rate would have been in 2000. If I did the math correctly, 2 players accounted for 308 unassisted threes last year. I'm not going to name any names. They're both West Coast point guards. I think I want to pause from talking about specific myths to make a point which I think is going to be obvious and perhaps remedial, and I apologize, but ooh. That wasn't supposed to work. There. Basketball and baseball are different. I think we all know this. A lot of things we talk about when we do a statistical analysis of basketball have come from baseball. And there's good reasons for that. Baseball was first for a number of reasons. It was the first sport that the sabermetric movement really affected the way the game was covered and played and managed and stuff like that. And in many things that many concepts from baseball port straight to basketball and make a lot of sense. Rate-based stats as opposed to accounting stats, efficiency, things like that. These are all very important things in basketball analysis. Certainly treating the possession or the shot in a similar way as you treat the at-bat, as the fundamental confrontation between offense and defense. In broad terms, that makes sense. However, when you reach a certain level of detail, that there becomes some key differences that really should affect the way we talk about how these things work. And I think the best way I can think of to put the difference is the batting order. In baseball, 1 through 9 hits, then 1 through 9 hits again. In basketball, there aren't turns. If a guy is hot and the team keeps going to him, he can shoot every single time down the court. It would be like as if in baseball, a left-handed hitter saw a good left-handed reliever coming into the game and said, "No, I'll wait till this guy's out of the game." And I think that would be a pretty fundamental change in how baseball would work. So the key difference there is that where in a baseball plate appearance, you're either safe or you're out at the end of it. When we treat a shot the same way, it's either made or missed. But there's a very important third possibility, which is not shoot at all. There's no equivalent of a pass in baseball. And I think for things, especially like three-pointers, both looking at from an offensive and a defensive standpoint, that's a very important thing to keep in mind. I said earlier that three-pointers are often the result of good offense. Something good has happened for a player to be open enough to catch and shoot. We all know that the corner three is one of the most valuable shots in basketball. Yet it's a very small percentage of shot attempts are corner threes, even though everyone is desiring to shoot those. And it's because you have to do something right beforehand, and the defense is trying to stop you, and they're trying to make you make a different decision. And what this means is that a lot of what we would see as having a shot been contested well means that a player doesn't shoot at all. Which leads me to kind of a question. If people are familiar with BABIP in baseball, it's batting average on balls in play. Essentially, when it was first discovered, the theory was that if the hitter doesn't hit a home run, strikeout, or walk, the pitcher doesn't really have much control over what happens. And with better data recent years, I think that in baseball they've kind of relaxed that a fair amount, but in broad terms, there's still a fair amount of fortune involved with that. And talking about one of my least favorite stats in NBA parlance or basketball is defensive three-point percentage, either on a team level or an individual level. If there's one thing that the writers of Nylon Calculus have one note that we've hit many times over the year is that that's not really a thing. Literally, once the offensive player shoots the ball, what happens is out of the defense's hands. And this graph was created by Hannes Becker in his article talking about it. And it's basically indicating that on an individual level, defensive three-point percentage looks a lot like a coin flip would look. Now, I'm not saying that defensive three-point field goal percentage is just luck. I'm just saying that it looks a lot like it would if it was just luck. Because I don't think anyone who knows basketball would say there isn't a technique to defending a shot. I mean, we know what a bad contest looks like. It's either you just leave the guy alone to shoot. We know being closer to a shooter affects the percentage. If I'm standing 4 feet away from an NBA shooter on a catch and shoot, they'll shoot about 34%. If I'm standing 10 feet away, they'll shoot about 40%. That's a big difference. We also know what a bad contest looks like. It's, again, if the first adage is protect the paint, the second is don't foul a jump shooter, which, I mean, it turns, on a three-pointer, it turns a 35% shot into a 75 or 80% shot. So we know what bad contests look like. We have some evidence that there are good contests. In late shot clock situations, end of game situations where a team needs a three-point percentages are very low, even controlling for all other factors we can. But that's a style of defense that isn't necessarily available in regular game play, because at a certain level of abstraction, you both have to defend the three-pointer and prevent the player from driving to the basket. So to bring that to a point, since the range of accuracy on a catch and shoot three, depending on where you're defending, because if it's going to be a lower than 34% shot, for the most part, players just aren't going to take them. Even a 34% three is a 51% effective shot. That's a slightly above average shot. That's the best you can do. That means defending the three means avoiding the three entirely. So let me see. So after that, I want to finish with one truth and then leave some time for questioning. I've talked about teams are working harder to create more three-pointers because they've realized that that's a more valuable shot as a longer jump shot than the jump shots they're already taking. And how this has happened is a number of factors at work. First is individual skill development. As players have realized that the three-pointer is a vital piece to getting playing time and in many cases staying in the league, more and more players have spent more and more time working on their long-distance shooting. I think related to that is teams have done a lot more in terms of encouraging and even in many cases permitting players who have kind of that skill to step out farther and shoot those threes. A third thing that's happened, this has been talked about a lot over the last couple of years, is teams are downsizing more. So less time spent playing with two traditional big men, so more shooters on the floor. The practical effect, and the final thing is teams are also doing a lot of different strategic things. I mean, I'm talking a lot about catch and shoot threes. Kind of the implication of that is that to shoot a catch and shoot three, you have to catch the ball outside the arc. So teams have very much changed where people are catching the ball. So this is always an opportunity because that's more valuable real estate than having someone catch the ball at 20 feet, where roughly the same efficiency shot or the same accuracy shot is worth 50% less. The practical effect is, I think, as this graph shows, is that over the last 4 years especially, and this is current through the All-Star break of this year, is that the perimeter players have always had fairly high three-point rates. But over the last 4 years, the power forward, whether that's a team playing small or a traditional big man, has seen their three-point rate jump substantially. So there's now, most teams are playing with four shooters on the floor at any given time. And even this year especially, we're seeing that teams are much more often playing with 5 shooters on the floor. And so that, again, that we're talking about how the three-pointer has changed basketball. I think that is the fundamental change that we've really seen, is that more people are stepping further away from the basket, whether through strategy or different personnel combinations. I want to leave some time for questions, so I just wanted to end by saying that, everything I've set up here is still just a theory, and I think I and everyone should welcome better theories to supplant kind of what we've talked about here, because the goal isn't to be perfect, it's to be, it's to be, as Matt Deanna's Twitter handle said, to be less wrong. So I think that's what I had prepared. I've got about 7 minutes for questions, I guess, if people have any.
Similar to in soccer, the way they'll kind of measure or try to quantify complex game action, 5 passes, 4 passes in a row. Basketball, even seeing something like this up here, shot selection charts, they're kind of, to your point, the result of a series of plays beforehand. How advanced are basketball departments at kind of saying, well, if you're running this style of a play, you're screening over here, that's going to be much better than screening over on this side, varying that to the player level, depending on who the opponent is. Is that kind of what's coming up next? Or how close is it to that, ideal state?
I don't think it would be a talk at Sloan if I didn't answer one question by saying I can't talk about it. But the question was, is if I can paraphrase, was that since these shot distributions are the end of like complex chains of actions, how much are teams getting into examining how those chains of actions turn out? And the answer is I'm not going to answer. So. The question is, he asked about, if people didn't hear, he asked about these star shots are still pretty inefficient shots, and that they are, but I think that the constraint is still the shot clock, and sometimes you have to take a shot, and also something has to happen for someone to get the ball under the basket or to catch it, to be open and catch it around the arc. So I think, yes, in an ideal world, but the defense is trying to prevent that, so sometimes you have to, players are able to shoot that at a reasonable rate. I think that, creating more space on the floor for the defense to cover is a good thing for an offense. At a certain point, you probably reach a level of a limit on the number of people who have the sufficient skill to do that effectively enough. Okay. I think I'm out of time, man. Thank you so much for coming.